Okay, guys, so it's actually kind of funny because you guys are taking the midterm right now, but this is the Monday double period lesson that I'm filming for you guys. It's going to be on labor unions. So the focus question is, how did workers start to get more rights throughout the progressive era? At this point, we've already kind of gone over what the progressive era is. You kind of got a good sense of what a muckraker is. And we've seen how we've kind of gotten rid of monopolies, okay, at this point. So now we're going to focus in on the specific workers, the factory workers, the construction workers. How do they start to get more rights at the progressive era? All right. Now, at any point, you could just pause the video, but as you can kind of tell, I've explained that we are establishing the problem on the left, which we've already kind of known, and then we're kind of going into the solution on the right. So the problem is, okay, and how we're trying to progress and get better throughout this time is how our unsafe working conditions, long hours, and low pay for workers improved to be more fair for the workers. Okay, we know about how the captains of industry often took advantage of their workers. Many workers did not have a minimum wage, they did not get paid a good amount of money, and they often worked very crazy long hours. All right, so let's look at why. But at any point you need to pause the video, go ahead to copy the notes, that's fine. But how we solve this is through labor unions. Okay, labor unions are an organized group of workers. So if you break down the word, labor means work, union means a group of people together. Okay, we've seen the word union when we did the Union and Confederacy during the Civil War, but union is basically an organized group of workers, okay, for a particular job. And why they are being brought together is if you work a certain job, you want to make sure you and your fellow workers are working together to make sure your rights are protected. Because the First Amendment goes into rights citizens have, but a lot of people, when they got a job, weren't really focused on having their rights protected, and that's a little bit of a problem because no matter where you are, you can't lose your inalienable rights, so to speak. All right, so a couple things were set up. Number one, labor unions are very big in making sure that you are being paid a fair wage for the job that you're doing. Okay, because back then, a lot of people were not paid a fair wage. So if you wanted to get paid a better wage, you can join up on the labor union. So I am in a teachers union. Okay, a teachers union, it's called the UFT, the one that I'm in. It's basically all the teachers at PS 89 and all of the teachers in the city. We are in a union to make sure that our bosses, our principals are treating us properly. Okay, there's certain rules and things they have to follow based on the contract that we come up with. All right, labor unions are also focused on working conditions. All right, they want to make sure that it's a safe place to work. Ultimately, it's very tough at times. It's very tough at times to keep working conditions 100% safe, but there definitely shouldn't be, huge glaring problems. All right, and of course, you want to make sure that the bosses are treating people fairly. I'm not saying like making their job hard, but like they need to be making sure that their rights are not being taken away. If you ever have a problem with not being paid enough, if you ever have a problem with the working conditions or treatment by your boss, the labor union can come and protect you and basically try and change things to make sure that you are protected. If they don't, they can go to court and they can maybe get things changed for you to help you out. Okay. The biggest thing a union could do, and we'll learn more about this on Thursday, the biggest thing a union could do is strike. Okay. And what that means is striking is very similar to protesting or boycotting, but a strike is specific when a worker voluntarily chooses to not go to work. Okay? Now, if Mr. Panio chooses himself to go on strike, say, you know what, I'm done, I don't want to be a teacher anymore, I don't want to work at the school because I'm not being paid enough or something, right? If I choose to do that by myself, I'm going to get fired from voluntarily choosing not to go to work. However, what if hypothetically all the PS 89 teachers say, you know what, we're done with this, we're not being treated properly, we're going to go on strike and not work? Well, now things are a little bit different. Is it realistic for Mr. Martinez or for the city to fire all of the teachers? Probably not. So what the bosses kind of have to decide is, okay, well, are we going to change the rule or the law, the thing that's making them upset, or are we going to allow them to strike because what they want is not possible? And if they do that, well, that means they're not going to have teachers working. All right, and that could cause a huge problem. So at any point, okay, a union could say, you know what, we don't think we're being treated fairly, therefore we're not going to go to work anymore. And you can fire us all if you want, but we also know you're not going to find 100 teachers over the next couple of days to take back over or whatever the job is. All right, so ultimately, okay, when you guys get a job, you get a contract. Okay, you have to look through the contract, you read through it, you need to make sure that you are being treated properly. Some jobs have labor unions, some don't. Okay, the jobs back in history we're looking at, the factory jobs, the construction jobs, working in a steel mill, those usually had labor unions. All right, so that's why we're looking at it. All right, anything that you do that's not written in your contract, or you're being mistreated, you could always go fight it in court. Or if you're a part of a union, your union can go and help fight for you. All right, so when you do things together, that obviously helps out a lot. Okay, that helps out a lot. That you don't have to be mistreated by work. And when I mean mistreated, like here's a good example. Like I'm under contract to teach social studies. Okay, 8th grade social studies. If Mr. Martinez says, you know what, you're done teaching social studies, you're now going to teach 1st grade ELA. I could fight that. I could say, no, I was under contract to teach social studies to this class. We agreed upon this, okay? And if Mr. Martinez says, yeah, and you know what, 1st grade teachers get paid less, so we're going to pay you less. I can go to my union and say, I believe that I am not being treated well by my contract. Therefore, can we fight this? And oftentimes, labor unions will, of course, fight. Let's say Mr. Martinez did this to the entire school. Well, the entire school says, you know what, we don't like the way we're being treated. The kids are not being treated well. We want to go on strike. All right, that's a big thing unions can do. We'll come back to strikes more on Thursday. All right, but I wanted to introduce that for now. Now, throughout the 1800s and 1900s, we're going to have what's called a labor union movement. Okay, so take a minute and copy this down. There are 3 major people in the labor union movement. All right. Basically, these are people that were the strongest in fighting for workers' rights. Okay, so the biggest one by far is Samuel Gompers. He's right in the time era that we're talking about. He's the leader of the labor union movement in the early 1900s. I consider him the Harriet Tubman, like using the abolitionist movement. He's the Harriet Tubman of the labor union movement. A lot of people who are workers look to him. He's the guy here on the top right. And he created what's known as the American Federation of Labor, or the AFL. It was by far the biggest union back in the 1800s and 1900s. And their biggest thing was working to improve pay conditions in factories. And we know that there's a ton of factory jobs available because of industrialization and urbanization. And he was the guy fighting for workers' rights. So anytime you see Samuel Gompers' name, you think he is dealing with the labor union movement and trying to get rights for workers in factories. Now, one of the least talked about people in American history, this class, is Cesar Chavez. He's not big on the Regents, but he is a big person in American history. I think we'll touch on him more when we get to Unit 6 or 7, but I definitely want to mention him now for the first time because he is also part of the labor union movement, but a lot bigger later on in history, in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. If you lived in the southwest of the country, he was very, very big in helping out the American farmers. Okay, he helped gain them more rights. He is also very big in Mexican-American history. We don't spend nearly enough time on him. He hasn't come up on the Regents yet. I try and just mention him because he is very big for Mexican Americans, for Latin Americans, and ultimately he was very big in the labor union movement, but more helping farmers. So Samuel Gompers is probably the biggest for helping the workers in factories. Cesar Chavez is the biggest for helping out farmers throughout American history. All right. And then that leaves the last person, John L. Lewis, the most basic American name, John Lewis, but he founded what's known as the CIO, which is the Congress of Industrial Organization. Very, very similar to the AFL. He took over more for what Samuel Gompers was doing from 1920 to 1960. The comparison I love to use is like when Harriet Tubman was done, and then eventually that led way to like other African-American figures in the abolitionist movement or the civil rights movement. So that leads to like W.B. Du Bois, if you know who that is. We'll learn about him later. That leads to like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. John Lewis kind of took over for Samuel Gompers. All right, he led a very similar organization, very helpful in getting rights. And then there's a big job in the 1930s and 40s that is called mining. Basically, people who work underground, okay, for mining materials and basically just working for underground to make sure, you know, everything underneath the surface of the country is good. Very dangerous job, very dangerous job. Mining workers is one of the toughest jobs to do, I would say. And he was very big in helping those people get their rights. Okay, so like during the abolitionist movement, I wanted you to know 3 or 4 or 5 major people. Same thing with the labor union movement. It's good to know. Definitely Samuel Gompers. Got to know him. The other 2, it's good to know, but they're not as big as Samuel Gompers. So please keep that person in the back of your mind. With that being said, I'm going to go to your assignment for the double period. I'm also going to let you know what your secret coded word is at this point. And your secret coded word is going to be strike. Okay, like workers going on strike or a baseball game strike. So that is your secret coded word. So please add that to the top. All right, and hold on, I have a question from a student that's taking the Regents. So let me take a look here. Sorry guys, bear with me 1 second. You can skip this part of the video if you need. Skip this part of the video if you're watching. Sorry about this. I have to check this though. Okay, so sorry about that. So if you're looking at, all right, so if you're following along with my tab here, you'll notice, okay, that you have to post a secret coded word. All right, so when you do that, the history of labor unions, okay, you'll see the file here. There is a reading. Things are going so slow. They're going so slow. All right, well, you'll figure it out. There's a reading here with some questions here on the right. I don't know what's going on here, guys. There's a reading here with questions on the right. You don't do the questions on the right. I repeat, you do not do the questions on the right. You're just going to do the questions on the Google Doc. So when you click on the reading, it will pop up, and then you're going to answer the comprehension questions, vocabulary questions, and then the 2 analysis questions at the bottom. All right, that's it for today's lesson. Okay, I will see you guys tomorrow. We will go into what's called tenements. I think you guys will really enjoy the lesson. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.